The Winnipeg Baroque Festival has seen many firsts this year, and another will be taking the stage at Canadian Mennonite University's Laudamus Auditorium this Thursday night. Fierbois, the duo of oboist Caitlin Broms-Jacobs and pianist Madeline Hildebrand, will be presenting the festival's first concert to showcase wind instruments. The concert is called Love and Madness and features music from the French Baroque tradition, as well as a couple of guest artists. Caitlin and Madeline join me once again in the Classic 107 studios. Nice to see you guys again.
Thanks, Nolan. Hello.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, of course. Maybe we'll start with you, Caitlin. You've already performed in the Winnipeg Baroque Festival. Now you get another crack at it with Love and Madness. How would you describe the music composed for wind instruments during the Baroque period in France, just to kind of zoom things out for us a little bit?
Wow. Okay. So I should first say that, as usual, a lot of the music that we're going to be playing, we will be playing it on wind instruments, but it was not originally written for wind instruments. And so the program features music by Lully, who is, of course, a French Baroque composer. It also features some Italian Baroque music, including Vivaldi's La Folia, and La Folia means madness. So that's where that element, of course, Lully was also a madman in some sense. So we have some thematic madness. But to answer your question, the Vivaldi is a trio sonata originally for 2 violins and continuo, but that doesn't stop us. So that will be the 2 violins will be me and Jan, and
right.
The continuo will be Maddie and Katie.
So it's so interesting to have this La Folia come up again in the Winnipeg Baroque Festival. Mm-hmm. It was shared over the weekend as well, and it's more traditional element by Fidem in Fidibus with those 2 violins. What sort of quality, as you are performing alongside Maddie, does this piece then take on with a wind context to it?
Oh, well, maybe I'll just start with saying that the chord progression of La Folia is one of the most used chord progressions in, can I even say all of music history?
I'd say so, yeah.
It has been adapted by even romantic composers. And so let me just say that in general, Baroque music has so much flexibility to it. And for instance, continuo means that you'll have a bass line that is done by often like a cello or a bass instrument. So in this case, Katie Brooks, principal bassoon of the WSL, will be playing that bass line. I will also be playing that bass line, right? But then, for the Baroque enthusiast theorists out there, there's something called figured bass, where these little numbers pop up underneath the bass notes. And what we do with those numbers is decide what inversion and which chord goes with each note of the bass line. So this is not a exact science. There's a lot of improvisation around this tradition. So that just stems right to the upper instruments, where there's a lot of tradition of ornamentation, tempi, even this kind of lilt that you want to approach each movement of La Folia with.
So within that, you are situating La Folia in this sort of French context. Maybe Caitlin, you can talk a little bit about the ornamentation that Maddie was just alluding to, and maybe some of the tricks that come with this particular Baroque tradition. What sorts of things will you and Jan be performing?
Sure. So we hear a lot of German Baroque music in Winnipeg, and we hear a certain amount of Italian Baroque music, Vivaldi, obviously, but we rarely hear French Baroque music. And it's quite a different style, and it's really fun for us to explore it because it is so stylistically different. And a large part of that are ornaments. I mean, it's just like absolutely drenched in like a bazillion little ornaments, which are kind of a challenge. And even the music is often notated by the composer. And so for us understanding what all these notations mean, does that mean we go to the note below or the note above? That's really fun for us to explore. And there's differences in phrasing that happen between French Baroque and German Baroque. And then there's another kind of really interesting thing that's called, it's in French, en égal, it means unequal. And it's not quite a swing, but it's not straight either. And it gives everything kind of a real lilt. So we're working on getting our groove on together with that.
So if we could give like a verbal example instead of, so if if the line goes dun 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 dun, instead of doing that, we're gonna go dun 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 dun.
As that sort of that sort of fun sort of lilt into
exactly.
spring.
Yeah.
So many considerations that you two then have to put into something like this, which is quite a far cry from your debut album, which we spoke about just a few months ago, Sing to Me Again, with the music from the Soviet Socialist Realist School, some 200 to 300 years after all of this French Baroque music was written. How do you adjust your approach, Maddie, as an ensemble when you're taking on these sorts of different types of music?
That's a really great question. Classical musicians are operating under this, just if I can call it, just massive umbrella of classical music, which spans, the Renaissance all the way to triggering MIDI technology for live or fixed electronics.
Sure. Yeah.
So the way I'll put it is we are highly trained to be adaptable to all styles of music under this massive umbrella. And but what's fun for me with this style is just the amount of flexibility in Baroque music, which can be surprising for somebody to say. I mean, as a youth, I remember feeling when I would practice and learn Bach, like there's this almost rigidness to it and like this holy way of doing it, and there's one way of doing it, but the more I learn and the more I grow as a musician, the more I understand that there's actually incredible flexibility. And my favorite part about Baroque music is so much of it is rooted in dance music. So there's this buoyancy to it as well. And so that's the challenge and that's the fun of all of it.
The more rules you know, the more you're able to break them, kind of thing. Very fun. We've talked about Lully and Vivaldi, Caitlin. Maybe you can talk about some of the other voices that will be featured in this program.
Sure. So we've talked about the madness. There's also the other side of it is love. So there's a piece that we're playing by the French composer Couperin, and it's sort of a love story, and it's called Il Ritratto dell'amore. And it's quite funny because it starts in E major, so we think, okay, this is pretty up sounding, it's all going well, and it ends in E minor. So maybe that isn't the...
There's the madness color coming back in.
Maybe it isn't the happiest love story, but and that's a really fun piece. And then we're also playing a piece by Monteverdi that I'm sure so many people will recognize, Por ti miro, one of the most famous love duets ever. And that's going to be played by me and Jan, with Maddie playing the continuo. And of course, as probably a lot of Winnipeggers know, Jan's my other half. So I think that will be
how fun.
Really fun. And I should also mention, this might be the last time that Winnipeg audiences will get to hear Jan in a chamber music setting, because he is going to be retiring from the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra after 51 years as the principal flutist. So I would encourage anyone who really wants to hear him play, now's your chance.
This is it. It's so interesting that you mention these sort of dialogues between love and madness. And as I'm listening to you talk about it, I'm like, how much distinction is there between the two? I mean, when you fall in love, you tend to go a little bit crazy sometimes. Especially if I think about the example from the Monteverdi, from the Coronation of Poppaea, that is a whole bunch of madness, and then that kind of resolves in love. As you approach a program with madness in it, Maddie, how do you keep that sort of, how do musicians maintain grounded approach and a sort of clear-eyed focus as they perform music that is very much not grounded?
We're still learning, Nolan.
Okay, well, okay. And we'll be excited to see the results.
No, I joke. It helps to have just the most incredible ensemble with you up there, right? Of course, Caitlin and I know each other extremely well, musically and personally, and we're so delighted to be joined by, I don't think we've said his full name yet, Jan Kochman, principal flute of the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra, and Katie Brooks, and principal bassoon. And we know that this is just, we're very sure that this is going to be a powerhouse quartet, and we're very excited to present together.
Just I'll insert that, the bassoon is also not featured very often on programs, and Katie is the most spectacular bassoonist. And so I think that she's going to be playing a Vivaldi concerto with Maddie. So this is going to be really like a special opportunity to hear Katie really do her thing.
Yeah. We've mentioned now that you've performed already in the Baroque Festival, Caitlin. When you look at this program, what do you think Love and Madness adds to this sort of ongoing conversation that the Baroque Festival is having with music from that era, but also, as was seen with the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra on Wednesday, music that sort of speaks across the centuries into that era as well?
Well, Baroque music, even though it's very old, is very emotional, and it really speaks to us now. And as I've said, it's really hard to say exactly why, but that's the beauty of art, right? And the Baroque music isn't some sort of tame, quiet thing that we, should be listening, in our little library and behaving ourselves. Like, Baroque music has this wild range of colors, of expression. It goes from incredibly dark and emotional to like the sun is just pouring down on you, and it's everything.
Party music, right?
Yeah,
it's party music,
and everything in between. And so I think the Love and Madness, this Vivaldi has some absolutely wild stuff in it, as only Vivaldi could write. The Lully was far from like a tame character in himself, and of course the Portimiro and is just so poignant. And so I think that we're just adding to the emotions, to the colors that are like the Baroque Festival is exploring.
So this is not only a dialogue across the centuries and across ensembles in the Baroque Festival, but also it's adding to sort of your lexicon as an ensemble, as it were, to perform different sorts of repertoire from different time periods. Maddie, as you look ahead to the next sorts of concerts that you two will be performing and the next sort of projects that you two want to take on, how does this repertoire spark your creativity for what you can do and pursue as a duo?
Well, that's a great question, Nolan.
Well, I'm going to start. I'm going to insert by saying we've never been shy to play things that weren't originally written for us.
Good answer, Caitlin. That's right. So, exactly. For instance, one of the pieces of music that Caitlin and I have been performing a lot this year is Violin Sonata No. 2 by Elizabeth Claude Jacquet-Laguerre, French Baroque composer. And this piece, we just actually performed it 2 nights ago in Almont, Ontario, to a big roaring success. They loved it. So, so if anything, it's just, it's expanding our canon. And like I said earlier, as classical artists, it's kind of a requirement to be able to span the eras of music composition, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'll just say, in this era where Baroque groups who play on Baroque instruments are becoming so prevalent, they're amazing, and we owe them so much for like showing us, how Baroque music was really sounded. And so we've learned a huge amount from those people, but now by playing Baroque music on modern instruments, we're almost doing something a little bit revolutionary, or certainly less commonly done. So we're going to be playing, all modern wind instruments.
Yeah.
Maddie's playing the piano.
I'll be playing that big, beautiful,
Yeah.
a million-foot Bosendorfer
Yeah, right.
on that, in that laud odd, at CMU, and for pianists, this is a tradition that so many of us have, accepted and are confident in presenting Baroque works on the piano. This is a great opportunity to say that I am very excited to play the French Overture by J.S. Bach.
Aha.
So this is the French Overture is also considered, I guess, the seventh partita. And what Bach is doing in this overture is really experimenting with this really majestic, double-dotted, overly ornamented introduction, followed by a very exciting dance movement, and then returning to this heavily double-dotted French overture. So it's going to be really fun to play that on this beautiful, beautiful instrument.
Absolutely. And traditions of all kinds being on full display at Love and Madness with Fierbois. Thursday night, 7:30 at the Laudamus Auditorium at Canadian Mennonite University. More details at winnipegbaroquefestival.com or at our website, of course, classic107.com and the Classic 107 app. Caitlin Broms-Jacobs and Maddie Hildebrand, it's a pleasure as always to have you here to talk about your amazing projects.
Thanks, Nolan.
Thank you so much for having us, Nolan.